So we're going to go straight into it. So Keele held their first school summit in 2019. They were helping to support some striking students at a local school, and they wanted to support the teachers and the students who were doing this. So Sarah's going to tell us all about that, and then she'll be joined by Dominic Swords, who is from Future Lives Project. He's also the visiting at the Business Economics at Henley Business School, and he's facilitated some of the workshops with the students at the events and talked to them about how they could, in practical terms, what they can do and how they could approach this. So I'm going to hand straight over to Sarah.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, so I'm Keele's Sustainability Project Officer. So my role is working with people across the whole university with academic staff to embed sustainability in the curriculum, with colleagues in estates for different campaigns and operational sustainability activities, with the Students' Union and students themselves to support their student-led projects, and basically anybody else who will listen to me and put up with me coming and going, sustainability, what can we do? How can we work together? Dominic will tell you more about him, but we ended up meeting at a summit that took place in Stoke called Control Shift, and I was just talking about how we were planning to have our first Schools Climate Summit at Keele, and so we Dominic was really interested in the idea, and we struck up the idea of having one of the workshops as part of our programme that brought in the Future Lives project. So could I have the next slide, please, Claire? So I just want to go through like the origins of the summit, why we decided to create this event, what the objectives were and what we hope to achieve from it, how we built the programme itself, and then Dominic will tell you more about SenseMaker and the collaboration that we had together through the event. And then I just wanted to highlight some successes, reflections, recommendations, and then so how you could potentially collaborate with Dominic if you're interested in using this project yourselves on your own campuses. Next, please. So there's been a lot of dialogue across the country in terms of climate change. Greta Thunberg has obviously been raising awareness around climate marches, school strikes, and we'd actually got local students at Keele who were really keen to be involved in this. They were collaborating with local colleges, local schools, and creating their own activities in the area. We'd also heard about Cumbria University holding an event on their campus, and we thought, right, okay, what can we do locally and collaborate with schools? Keele, where we're positioned geographically, we're sort of in between Staffordshire, Cheshire and Shropshire. So we thought, well, it's a really great opportunity to build on what we have there and connect in with people around the whole geographical area around Keele. And it was planned in 4 weeks. And as I was speaking to Dominic yesterday, I was actually planning it in and trying to finalise everything before being off for 3 weeks, with the event then happening the week that I was back. But what we were keen to do was actually get this scheduled in so that it happened before the end of the school year. We didn't want it to get to be another school year starting, and even though that put a lot of pressure on pulling everything together for this event, we just felt it was really important to build on the energy from our students, from the sort of the social dialogue that was happening, and just make this event happen. That's it. Great. So what we wanted to do is bring together representative students from schools across Staffordshire, Cheshire and Shropshire. So we opened up the summit, sent it around some schools' mailing lists. We connected in with the university's marketing team, so through outreach connections, and we wanted to be able to open this event up for students all the way from year 7 up to colleges, sixth forms in year 13. So the idea was to be able to bring those representatives together at all those different levels of the schools, so that then when the students go back to their schools, they could actually take back the learnings that they've got and be inspired to make change happen at their individual locations. And what we wanted to do was build from the science that's behind sustainability challenges to then look at the individual actions that students can adopt. We wanted to start, as I'll go through with the programme, and how we built that, with looking at what are these really big key challenges that we're facing as a society that students will be affected by throughout their lives, but what can they actually do to connect to these so that they don't feel, so they feel empowered. And so we wanted to do that through giving a toolkit, so schools could then utilise that with larger groups of students when they were back as part of teaching in the new school year, and so that students across their schools could actually feel empowered and connected to and able to help contribute to tackling climate change. We also wanted to be able to connect to outreach activities and build links with schools for future events and collaborations. So many universities do Green Week. We transformed our Green Week for the last year to Keele Green Festival, and we're having a 2-week festival for 2020. And what we want to be able to do is have those connections with more schools and bring in more of the local communities we've seen some of the universities doing. So this gives us an opportunity to build some of those links, but then also embedding the sustainable development goals throughout the content of the different workshops and drawing those connections. And some of our activities had tools that the schools could then use as well, that enables them to build on how they can use the sustainable development goals in their different classes. So when we set about building the programme, we thought, okay, we've only got 4 weeks. It's a relatively small amount of time. So although we could have had connections across the entire university, we ended up doing a more localised programme focusing on expertise within the School of Geography, Geology and the Environment. We also linked to the university's Institute for Sustainable Futures. So that launched last year and brings together academic staff from around the university who are working on research that connects to 6 big key themes that are all themselves mapped to different sustainable development goals. So we framed it with that sort of rooting in research and what our different academic staff are working on to tackle some of these big sustainability challenges that relate to climate change. So Geography, Geology and the Environment also fits within the Faculty of Natural Sciences. So we were able to put a bid in for some funding through the Faculty Outreach Fund. That enabled us to cover the catering rather than asking people to bring their own lunch. And it meant that we could keep the event free, which we felt was really important for the people who were actually attending the event. We also, after I met Dominic at the Control Shift workshops, that opportunity to have an external collaboration just felt like a really fantastic opportunity that we couldn't miss out on. Because although we have sort of connections with our Students' Union who do fantastic work around student voice, it was hearing about Dominic's tool and the work that he's been doing really sounded like it fit perfectly with what we wanted to get our students taking away from attending the event. So what we also wanted to do with this programme is build from the bigger picture through exploration of individual impacts. So it was having that scientific, large, wicked problem related issues to start with in the morning, to then move through into what can you do as individuals, what's already happening at your schools, and what can you then change. So we had hands-on workshops in the morning, and then move forward to equipping students with tools to express their voice. And then we rounded the day off with a forum so that we could share current practices that the different schools were doing and inspire change that went beyond the summit itself. So this is just showing some of the actual programme itself. So we had our welcome from Professor Chris Fogwell, who is the director of the Institute for Sustainable Futures. And then Chris's work is specifically linking with ice cores and climate change. So it was just a really nice way in their lessons at school. And during the lunch break, Chris actually took the students on a tour of our ice lab, and they were able to go and pick up a piece of ice that had been retrieved from an ice core. So it was originally had, when we were first planning the programme, almost a wish list of what sort of skills had we got, who would be available during the time that we were holding the summit and would be interested in and happy to contribute to it. And we also thought, do we have just a linear programme, so all of the students will just go to each class and it just be held in one specific room the whole time, or do we split down into a larger number of smaller workshops? Because of the number of students that we were hoping to have, we decided to go with 3 different parallel sessions, and students were put into groups and rotated around those different groups. So they started off with a climate, weather and soil session with Dr. Helen Glanville, and we had a sandbox that uses a Xbox Connect camera, and you can actually see the different topographies and look at rainwater distribution and sort of put your hand underneath, interrupt the image and see rainfall and where that affects with watersheds, so that could then be related back to soils and waterlogging, and if we have distribution of rainfall changing, what that could mean. In that session, the students also had access to like a computer program that they were playing, like for some gamification of learning. So they were planting trees, but having to look at the resources that they generated to fund buying more trees and how they manage the land. The second session was about tracking environmental change with drones. So the students were very excited to be using cake as a representation of the different landforms and glacial retreat, and we had some mini drones that Ben Davenport was demonstrating that links to his PhD research. And then we had pollinators and climate, so we were looking at what impact will a changing climate have for our pollinators, what do our pollinators need, different species, and this enabled our students to get outside. We did have a contingency plan so that if the weather was absolutely dire, we had a lecture theatre booked, but we were fortunate that they were able to all go outside and go and do some pollinator spotting. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to show some images of some of those sessions. So the one that's outdoors obviously is the pollinators. So the students were just working in the groups and connected and using resources from pollination. And more than happy to share links to all these different programs and to pollination that Angie Turner ran as well, because that's something that's really easy that students can then take back to their schools and implement and go out and do, especially if they've got sort of gardening areas or wildlife areas in their school grounds. Lewis in the Centre was one of our student ambassadors, so we actually employed 3 student ambassadors to help with the workshops as facilitators. So that's the very small on the screen, but that's the gamification with the tree planting. The next image is with the sandbox, and then the drones, very micro little drone in the middle and a piece of the chopped up cake behind it. And then I just put in a couple of images showing the lunch, because we collaborated with our catering team with the lunch, and we said, we don't want to just end up with sandwiches that are all in individual packages. If we're talking to students about things that they can do individually, what can we actually do to make sure that everything they're seeing, that we're connecting to the sort of the hidden curriculum that they're getting from this, as well as demonstrating being sustainable in what we provide for the food. So they did us like a packed lunch, put it all in baskets for us. We had some delicious cupcakes, and then the sandwiches were all individually wrapped, so that it just created that nice atmosphere for them. And then all of the students were encouraged to bring bottles with them and use the water machine that was in the building, rather than us providing bottled drinks for them. And then the bottom picture is from the session that ran after lunchtime with Dr. Richard Waller, and we also had a collaboration in from Estates from Ash Hume, who is leading with our Smart Energy Network demonstrator. So the idea behind this was showing how institutions like universities can have flagship projects that connect to things like reducing carbon of transport and decarbonising society. So it was really nice to be able to bring that collaboration together from Estates and with this flagship project to then tell students about it. And they were then also able to connect things to their own personal lives, like, would their family invest in an electric car? How would they actually change behaviours to reduce the amount of impact from their own transportation, for example? So this is just the second half. So we also had things like, we have a copy of the carbon footprint game. So we had just a sustainability stall that just showcased all sorts of different things that we do, and people could go and play the carbon footprint game during lunch. We had the future transport and energy systems workshop, and then we had 2 parallel sessions working after that for the afternoon. So I delivered a Student Voice for Climate Action workshop with input from Rachel Hadley, who is our Student Voice coordinator over in the Students' Union, and then Dominic was delivering the Making Sense of Climate Change workshop. So this gave us a fantastic opportunity to collaborate from the connection that was made through the Control Shift Summit, and to then also be able to use the fantastic tool that Dominic is an expert in bringing forward to this sort of event. So I'll hand over to Dominic now to tell you more about his work and what that workshop entailed.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. No pressure. Fantastic, an expert. You mentioned that in that final sentence. I mean, it was an amazing day, you've spoken about the structure and the process and the people presenting, and what amazed us in getting involved in the day was just how incredibly engaged those students were, and you got a real sense that they have some really great ideas, and they were going to go back to their schools and do different things, and that kind of connects very well into what our project is about. So my wife and I have both worked in the area of complexity around leadership management strategy and those kind of things, and it struck us that we should bring that notion of how you manage in complexity as a way of making sense of climate change and the things that people can do. That was the first point. Second point is we realized, the people that are most important to connect with are young people, whether as students in school or at university. It feels really important that we need to give them a voice and equip them to understand as they enter the kind of the employment system, as they move into that world. It's not simply about them adopting the behaviours, attitudes, decision-making processes of the organisations they work with, but they need to bring their core values in and influence what's happening in all those different economic, political, social, familial systems that they're operating in. So that's the Future Lives project, helping young people articulate, understand and express their aspirations for the future. So what I've got on the screen here is the instrument that we use. We've built in collaboration with a research group at Bangor University called the Cynefin Foundation, and it's called SenseMaker is the software. If we can move on to the next slide. The software presents to people completing it just a few prompts, which gets them kind of warmed up in a sense to what is the domain that we're talking about. And in this case, there's this visual, just trying to kind of get people into the space of thinking about the different dimensions of climate change. If we move on to the next slide. And the particular kind of uniqueness, I guess, of this instrument, it's a narrative-based. It's a narrative-based instrument. So we asked people to tell us a short story from their experience of how climate change matters to them, how they've seen something in practice, whether it might be in their very local situation with their family or their friends, or it might be something they see in the wider context. So just to tell that story. And then that story is used as the basic data with which we ask the respondents to score and rate that story in different ways. If we go on to the next slide, I'll show you an example of that. The construct behind it is that we use what we call triads, which are three-way diagrammatic representations of the different issues that might be present in a particular circumstance or situation. And sometimes, and others, we use dyads, where there are kind of competing forces at work for people. And what I've given you here is just an example of a triad and a dyad, and how the youngsters at the Keele Summit answered those questions. So they tell their story, and then we ask them to rate the story. And this triad here was about what was the focus for your concern. Was it about you and your friends? Was it about future generations? Was it about the environment? And what it gives you very rapidly, you can, and you share this. We shared this in the workshop with the people as they answered it. You're looking for patterns, common patterns that are drawn out from those micro narratives. And on this particular triad, you see there's a bunch of respondents which are absolutely down on the bottom right towards what we are concerned about as the environment. And then you get a lot of people there kind of between, equally concerned about the environment and the future generations. You know, one thing that was striking about this group is that it wasn't about me. A very strong sense that the motivation behind what they wanted to do was about the planet and about people in the future. And we explored that and asked them why that was the way in which they were concerned. The dyad shows you that we asked them to rate their thinking around, to make a difference, do we need structural change or individual change? And the majority, slim majority, was saying that it's about structural change. But you see here this pattern of conflicted issues. It's not just about, oh, what we need to do is pass the law. It's not about people need to change. There's a real kind of your interdependent pairs. There's a real kind of conflict between, to some extent, we need individuals to change, and it's both. So again, that opens up a conversation about what kind of structural change. Is it about, for example, I think something that came out was talking about how it was easy for people to ignore recycling facilities, and that you needed to work with people and with the structural systems there that are in place to get people to do the right thing, to recycle and so on. And that was a conversation, a story that came out of one of the youngsters doing a litter pick in their school. So a key thing about this is that it's gathering data from individuals' experiences. You dialogue that data and you kind of talk about it together and ask people why that is what they want to do. Why is that a focus of their attention? The particular issue, we use this short framework, which is what, so what, now what, which is what data do you have? What are these stories? What do they tell us? What are your conclusions? And then what one action can you take to alter the system? And in doing this, there are a number of objectives, really. The primary objective is to enable people filling in the form in the instrument, working as a group, to make sense of what they are feeling and thinking. This is not about trying to do a global survey of everyone, those that are engaged, unengaged, worried, not. This is about focusing on people actually that are engaged with the concern of climate change, to help them articulate what they are talking about and actually expand their influence. So what actions can they take to influence the groups they're part of? And an interesting development really has been, I don't think we quite realized this when we started this, which was earlier this year, and we're still in a pilot phase, collecting data and running workshops to the end of the year. We're running it with the Sheffield Hallam next month. And the particular, as part of a learning program, and the guy was saying that what he wants this to do is get people to think, and these students are in the real estate program, get people to think, how do I need to be different as I enter the workplace? These are final year students, and it's specifically focused on that particular question. And so that has been what we've primarily been wanting to do. Facilitate, enable, give people the capability to make sense of the systems they operate in. There is also an advocacy role, and later in at the end of this presentation, we'll be saying something a little bit more about that. But I think it's time to hand back to Sarah. I think you're taking on the next stage, just talking about the successes, I think, of the day.
Yeah, so just before I do, one of the things that I think was really nice is by having Dominic's workshop sitting alongside the student voice workshop, they both had that same ethos of getting students to unpick their own connections and think about their perspectives around sustainability, why they might differ from each other and how it's important that they do differ from each other and how they could learn from each other. And it just allowed the students to take what they learned in the morning and consolidate that and make sense from it. And I think the sessions and some of the comments from the students who'd been using SenseMaker said how useful it was to actually do that. And a couple of our students were facilitating with the workshops, as I mentioned before, and they actually went through and used the program themselves as well. And they said how it made them think about things in a different way, and it was challenging them to ask themselves questions that they'd never actually asked of themselves previously. So in terms of the actual successes, when we were originally planning the event, we didn't know how many people we would manage to get, but we were thinking our upper limit would have been around about 100. We ended up with 40, and it actually worked really well for the first event and as a pilot to then learn from. We'd opened it up, as I mentioned before, to students from year 7 all the way up to doing A-levels in year 13. We had a couple of connections to local colleges where people had circulated the emails, but we didn't get anybody signing up to it. And in the end, it was year 7 to year 10 students who attended. And although I didn't get any specific reasons why that was from the teachers, I'm assuming that would be because even year 10 students will still come back and have their year 11 now, so are still then applying what they've learned by going to the summit while they're at the school, whereas the year 11 students, because it was in July, they would have only had perhaps 2 days left before they broke up for summer, and then were going off to a college that may not have been attached to the school that they were at. But those 40 students were from 11 different schools and across 3 different counties. So we had a really nice mix, and it was great to welcome students from schools from like around Stoke-on-Trent particularly, where there's like a lot more deprivation in the area, and it just brought in those different perspectives. In particular, the workshops that we had were really well received by both the students and the staff, with the wide variety of sustainability challenges that were linked to climate change. So our plan to try and represent how broad sustainability is and just how many different aspects of our lives and our behaviours feed into that had been quite successful, which we're really pleased about. And then the student participation feeding through, as I mentioned, was just really great. And then a quote that we had from West Kirby Grammar School, the teacher emailed me afterwards saying that she just wanted to say how great the day had been, and the students been buzzing all the way home with ideas, and how important it had been to inspire the students. So it was just really great just to get that feedback, and we had other comments on our Facebook page where we'd done posts about it from another local school. Have the next slide, please. So just wanted to include some specific feedback. So we had some evaluation forms that we asked the staff and the students to do, and we had a separate form for the staff to the students, just so that we could evaluate those differences of opinion. So the students had said things like about it raising awareness for future generations, which maps back to some of those students and their comments in the SenseMaker tool. Teaching the students a lot that they were not previously aware of, liking it when they went outside, looking at all the different flowers that insects like, the sandbox and building up the gradients, and then also going and seeing the ice room. Another student really liking the catchment game with the tree planting, and interesting that they'd picked out specifically because of using problem solving to help with environmental problems. And then just the last comment that I thought was just really nice, because it was saying about lots of people that are enthusiastic about the environment, getting together to educate other people about the environment. And that really epitomises what we wanted to achieve, and the objective of bringing together different stakeholders and their different levels of expertise, their different specific areas of research, and bringing in partners from estates who are working on real world projects, and people from the Students' Union who are connecting to students on a daily basis. The staff feedback tended to focus around some key areas, so there was a lot of feedback around really enjoying the range of different sessions that were provided for the students, and highlighting the range of subjects that do affect climate change. They really enjoyed the varied programme and the range of speakers that were there. and some specific comments such as going and seeing the ice core lab, of that being a highlight for the day, and then appreciating the mixture of workshops and having the hands-on work. And there are quite a few comments that we really enjoyed the practical nature, and the things that were deliberately devised. Okay, schools may not have a mini drone, they may not have a sandbox, but the principles of these sorts of activities can be easily transferred back to the different schools and can be built into other outreach activities. So it was kind of like a taster of all different areas that could then lead into more, which we were really pleased that had translated in that way for the teachers as well. So some reflections from the event itself. So it was fantastic to bring together students from different areas because they were bringing their own individual ideas. And in the same way, having year 7s, year 8s, year 9s, year 10s all together, they'd all got their different perspectives. But I think for the next event, we could make more of their different perspectives. So when we had the climate forum at the end of the day, it was framed around having 4 different benches in the room with different questions. And then the groups of students, they were split into different groups and moved around the benches to contribute. So we had, what are you doing now? What will you change? What is your school doing now? And what would you change at your school? And it just enabled them to think individually and also at more of a sort of institution organisational level and how they can be part of that change. But I think we would change that for next year by having something more around having the students prepare a presentation of say 2 minutes that they can then come and deliver. And then they're gaining a different experience as well. And that could then feed into some of these different conversations about what they think needs to change and what they can then learn from each other. The workshops offered great diversity, but it was very hard to fit them into those 30-minute sessions. And it's a difficult one because if we were to reduce the amount of workshops so that there was more time between them, we would then have that, we would lose what the students and what the staff were highlighting as one of their favourite and what they felt was the best thing about the summit. So I think we were lucky that we were able to get rooms that were close enough to each other that we could do swap overs, but it was a little bit hectic just getting everyone rotating around between those sessions. So now we've actually got new central science laboratories on campus that have opened. So I would actually look at, is that space available to have a bigger group, to then have students almost moving between benches with different activities, or would it be better to then split the session into fewer workshops, maybe have 2 parallel sessions that swap over with a break in between? It's something to consider because there's pros and cons with each. And maybe if we try it out the other way for the next event, we can then learn and see which one ends up being the best overall. We found that grouping by age groups, maybe it could have been more effective having year 7s to year 9s and then year 10 to year 13. We didn't have any year 11s, 12s or 13s. So if we'd have had the full breadth of students, I think we may have ended up with quite a lot of disparity with things of the students' existing knowledge. And then particularly if the staff want to feed things forward into the curriculum, that could be a little bit more tricky. So that's something that we definitely consider for the next event of, do we have 2 separate days and have one for year 7 to year 9, one for year 10 to year 13, or just separate workshops that are happening with that different age focus? And again, that could help with the workshop diversity and the timings for those as well. We found that staff really enjoyed working with the students, sharing their research and doing something that was just completely different. And the student ambassadors that were employed gained great experience that's then on their CVs. It links to employability and it's made them want to get involved with more things. All of the students who were involved on the day have been involved with further projects since. So it's had a fantastic feed forward for us in terms of engagement with other co-curricular activities. One of the biggest drawbacks was because of the timing with the programme. So some of the schools had come with a school minibus, so had to get back to the school because that minibus would be used for getting students back home. So they had to leave early. So whether we would run the day and end earlier, or if we were actually communicating a lot earlier in advance, that might alleviate that problem anyway. But that's just something that we need to reflect on to make sure that people don't miss out on the full programme and being able to consolidate what's been learned in the morning sessions. So I just wanted to share some recommendations, and Dominic may have a couple of extras to add from his slide as well that just build on this. But really utilise your experts and embrace the diversity of sustainability. Because sustainability issues do affect so many different areas, for the next event, I really want to be able to link in with academic staff from other schools within the university. But all of the different people who were involved this time, we still had a great diversity within the programme. So whether you're looking locally within one school or within one faculty to own an event like this, or whether you're looking at a whole university event, I think, you know, you've got experts everywhere, so utilise them. And also people who are not just within the academic side, but within the Students' Union, within catering for connecting to the food and the wider operational things that are part of the event. Thinking about the practical sessions and making sure they're easy to reset and run in parallel, especially for larger numbers. So we were fortunate that all of the sessions that we had, although it was a quick turnover, we had built in sort of 5 minutes for people moving between and knowing that there may be toilet breaks that were needed. But all of the sessions were very easy to just start again and run a second time or third time. But just planning that can be quite important for making sure that the entire schedule for the day runs on time. Considering room sizes for whole group sessions. So some of the sessions that we had, the initial welcome, the session with Chris Fogwell, the Energy Futures and Decarbonising Society workshop worked really well in that whole group environment, and then with the forum as well. But we were limited with the room that we had. We probably couldn't have fit many more in that one room without it becoming a little bit more uncomfortable, and of course room limits anyway on numbers for fire regulations. So just thinking about, if you have whole group sessions, it's great to have everybody in there and bringing in more voices, but then it might give restrictions for actual resources and rooms that are available altogether. When considering things like the age groups, there can be that benefit as well of bringing in the different knowledge as people have gone through the school. So by having students who are further on, who are doing GCSEs, they could then be sharing their knowledge with, say, Year 7 students, but making sure that everybody's voice can still get heard. Some projects, such as co-curriculum projects, linking to the garden, linking with pollinators, could very easily be done as a bigger group, because when students go back to their schools, they're likely to be doing that across the school with students from all different ages linking in. But if it's something linking specifically curriculum and knowledge or skill based, it might then be more appropriate to split those groups down. Consider timing in the school year and for the programme. So that's relating to as losing some of our students sadly before the end of the day. But also, as I said at the start, we did want to make sure that we could run this before the school year ended. We talked about, do we do it in September? But we thought, no, we need to just build on this while the energy is here. But then working with local schools, we found that people were able to come because it was the end of term, so there was less drain with the curriculum and children missing the curriculum-based scheduled in classes. However, if it was partway through the school year, could it then feed in more to other work that they're doing in the schools? Again, it's something to sort of weigh up and reflect on. And then just connect with wider stakeholders, as we did with our catering team. It's a great way to involve them, and then they feel like they're part of these bigger events, which is always nice for them to be able to get that recognition for contributing to things that are linking to the curriculum, and especially where we're bringing in people from outside the institution. So I'll just hand back over to Dominic for the final slide about some of their actions going forward, and then invite any questions.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much, Sarah. So since that Keele event, we have been extending our use of the instrument in a number of schools, primarily here. I live in the Peak District, so Manchester, mainly Sheffield. We've connected with some schools there, many of which do seem to have very active eco groups. We also were present at the most recent youth strike, which gave us access and connections with more people who are interested in the project. We have started, interestingly, to connect with some universities. Obviously, I've got a connection with the business school at Henley, also know some faculty around the network. So next month, for example, we're running it with a group of real estate students, as I said before, in Sheffield Hallam. And the real issue there is not just about doing a survey which gathers ideas and reports on these ideas, but it's getting people to think about what their future life can be like. So in that sense, the instrument is both revealing the system to itself, as well as collecting data from an advocacy point of view. For example, from the youth strike, a lot of youngsters filled it in, and we're going to put a report together, send it to the local MPs that were present to demonstrate, to demonstrate that the young people that we're talking about have got some remarkable ideas, and the system of government needs to take that into account. We would be delighted to do more of this. I mean, if you're interested in a follow-up, my contact details are on the next slide. And back on slide 11, you'll get copies of these slides. There is the URL link to the instrument. And if you want to complete that, do that by all means. If you want to share it with people, do that. We just want to get the thing out. And we want to gather data and help the system evolve and become quite an influential part of our society. Grand aims maybe, but would love to work with other people doing that. Sarah, back to you, I think.
So I just want to say thank you to Claire and to Fiona for the invitation to deliver the webinar. I hope it's been really interesting and useful for you to sort of hear about what we did, the journey we went on, some of our learnings, and we're more than happy to answer any questions you have and share any of the links and the resources to the different activities that we had during the programme itself.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, both of you. That was really, really interesting and quite ambitious project. So I don't know how you pulled that all together. Loved how you were just kind of drawing in all those participants and all those different kind of areas of expertise, as well as kind of your catering and things. While we're waiting, Sarah, I just had a quick question on, you mentioned a thing called the carbon footprint game.
Yes.
Just a little bit more information on that.
So it's the game How Bad Are Bananas, that's based on Mike Berners-Lee's book that we had a copy of from Dr. Emma Fieldhouse. So if people have seen Emma there with the game at the EAUC conferences, it's something that we use as a tool during things like induction and at different events. And it's like a sort of higher and lower, sort of which has got the most embedded carbon within it, with things like food, different types of transport, things that you can consume, there's things like jeans and shoes in there. And it's just a really nice way to start some of those conversations, but also start unpicking and digging into some of the complexities. So things like, it's not just a plastic bag or a paper bag, it's when it rots down, does it give off methane? But it also then enables people to think, okay, is just swapping everything from plastic the answer? And connections to transportation, food, wider dietary changes, and we just, it's a great visual and really quick and easy to either do a quick game or to, like I say, delve into some deeper conversations around the carbon that's embedded into different things that we consume.
The other thing I wanted to ask you is, in terms of, obviously you're working with schools here, do you think that programs like this will encourage, students at schools to really be looking for more environmental accreditation if they're going on to further or higher education? Do you think that's something that this will inspire them to kind of go, well, that's really important to me, that's what I'm looking for?
I think one of the things that surprised me the most was, like Dominic said, with eco schools becoming so much more prevalent in schools, quite a few of the students were either on school councils or had got an eco schools accreditation they were working towards. And I mentioned that we have, within the student voice reps scheme within the Students' Union, we have sustainability voice reps who specifically look at sustainability. And there were a lot of students sort of looking around at each other and at their teachers and going, oh, we could do that. And I think it is something that the students are looking for more. And they were very aware of the things that their schools were doing, and then also things that they wanted to see their schools change. So if these students are doing that in their high schools, when they then come up to university I think it's only natural that they'll be expecting more and more of the universities, especially when that's where the research is coming from and where the, you know, the expertise is. I think that they're only going to have a greater expectation on institutions and higher education to be doing that.
Yeah, great. Brilliant. Well, thank you both again. Dominic would be very interested to hear about how you go with the Sheffield Hallam one and how that all goes. Sarah, when is your next one planned? Have you got another one planned?
So we were talking about potentially doing something earlier in the year this time, so February, March time, perhaps to coincide with the SDG teaching that the NUS launched. So we're putting feelers out to the schools to see whether they would prefer that or whether they prefer the end of term timing, so that then they don't have as many issues with cover for, like, if the staff are away or if there's things that students then miss. So we've got sort of two ideas in mind as to where, you know, let's see what the schools want to make sure that it fits with what they want to then use the experience for in their individual locations. So in the slides, the only bit that I didn't include in the programme was where the parallel sessions had repeated, but I can also share a PDF of our programme as well, which I can email over to you, Claire, if you like, and then share that with anyone who'd like a copy. And in terms of the funds, it was a faculty outreach fund bid that we put in. So there was a pot of money that was available that supports different outreach events. And because we were connecting with schools from around the area, we were able to put in the bid to cover the cost of the food and the student ambassadors. So it didn't cost a lot to do it. And I think that's one of the great things, that the biggest resource was my time, support from a colleague who works on open days and supporting outreach, who was fantastic. Angie, who ran one of the sessions, who was also helping pull together the programme. Alana, who was our sustainability intern, who was liaising with all the schools while I was gallivanting around Spain in my camper van. And then all of the fantastic team who came together to run the different workshops. So the biggest thing was the passion and energy from the people who made those sessions happen. And in terms of financial, it didn't need a lot to make it happen.
But thank you all for joining us, and please share this webinar once we've got it up on the Sustainability Exchange. It would be really great if we could share it with more people. Yep. Julie says that it's been great food for thought and for things we can put into place at Wakefield. So Sarah, are you happy to answer any questions, or if people have kind of other questions that I can send on to you?
Of course, my email address was at the end of the slide, so more than happy for people to get in touch directly. And
likewise about the work that we're doing. If you want to contact me so if it's more about the instrument, then contact me. And obviously the broader issues around the whole summit, to which really got to congratulate Sarah on what you pulled together. And on the day, you were very calm, and it just ran so smoothly. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you very much, everybody. And hopefully we'll be hearing lots more about all of these things.